from the century-long tradition they'd be leaving behind to the difficulties they'll face if they want to come back. Here's why pro golfers should never leave the PGA. There's a lot of reasons why golfers should avoid switching over to LIV, starting with the nearly 100 years of history they'd be leaving behind. The PGA Tour was established in 1929, and over the decades, it's seen some of the best and brightest golfers of all time grace the courses. Compare that to LIV Golf, which is barely 3 years old at this point. And you can see why some people think it's a no-brainer. After all, the thing that sets golf apart from other sports can be summarized in one word: prestige. Any golfer who wants their name to go down in history would prioritize an esteemed organization like the PGA Tour, and you can see that when you check out the big names that stuck around. Now, it's kind of understandable that some players wanted to head down to Saudi Arabia when they got the call. LIV was offering multi-million-dollar signing bonuses, with Phil Mickelson allegedly receiving $200 million just to leave the PGA Tour behind. But at the same time, the Saudi government-backed organization has failed to attract even bigger names like Tiger Woods. Rory McIlroy has also given the rival tournament a wide berth, despite the chance to earn more money than he could imagine. In fact, McIlroy has become one of LIV Golf's biggest critics, to the point where he refused to acknowledge Patrick Reed just cause he abandoned the PGA Tour. This led to an altercation between the two at the Emirates Golf Club, so you can already tell that the golf community is becoming increasingly fractured by the day. That's yet another reason why golfers shouldn't join LIV. All that money comes at a heavy cost to the spirit of the game, and there's just no way to get it back once it's gone. Of course, that's not the only factor at play here. Some would say that LIV Golf's peculiar rules aren't in the best interests of most players, like the whole team's gimmick, for example. This might just be one of the more arbitrary aspects of the Saudi tournament, because the existence of these teams just doesn't make a lot of sense. It adds nothing to the game, and on top of that, some players might benefit from having heavyweights on their side. For example, Pat Perez gave a middling performance in the 2022 tournament, but he still ended up earning a hefty $2.5 million just because he was on the same team as Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, and Taylor Gooch. In a way, this team structure is giving an unfair advantage to players that aren't bringing their best to the table. And that's definitely something that pro golfers should be against. And besides, does anyone really care about these teams at the end of the day? You probably don't remember the names of most of these teams, let alone the players that they brought on board. Sure, you could say that the tournament is still in its early stages. Maybe the teams will start to seem like less of a gimmick after some time passes. But most golf fans just don't get why they exist in the first place. Abandoning the traditional home of American golf for a shiny new tournament is bad enough. And the presence of an inexplicable team structure only further proves that golfers should ignore the LIV hype. The 54-hole rule is also leaving a bad taste in people's mouths, so we should definitely talk about that too. For one thing, it turns each round of golf into a cakewalk, and that really takes sportsmanship out of the equation. 72 holes played over 4 sessions might seem like a lot, but that's the whole point. With just 54 holes and 3 days of play, golfers are coasting to the finish line without really testing their physical capabilities. My point is that the LIV Golf League is trying to fix something that ain't broken, and no self-respecting golfer should participate in that. I haven't even gotten to the worst part yet, by the way, because there's one aspect of LIV that we really should be talking about. Many are saying that this tournament is part of the Saudi government's sports washing campaign, which is yet another reason for pro golfers to steer clear. As controversial as it might sound, Saudi Arabia has a spotty track record when it comes to human rights. The thing is, it also has a vast fortune in oil reserves, and that gives the government plenty of cash to distract from some of the horrible things it's been involved in. They recently managed to bring Cristiano Ronaldo over to give their fledgling soccer league a boost, and it seems like they're trying to pull the same stunt with golf. Look, a lot of pros are simply in it for the money, so they'll obviously go for the fattest paycheck possible, but they can't just ignore LIV Golf's true purpose. To be fair, Saudi Arabia is also trying to promote tourism and challenge the PGA Tour's monopoly on the sport. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to read between the lines. This is a blatant attempt to distract from incidents like the death of Jamal Khashoggi and the countless other instances of human rights violations that pepper Saudi Arabia's recent history. Any golfer that cares about basic freedom and rights can't join LIV Golf in good conscience. And if you need any more proof of that, just take a look at who they've got as their CEO. I mean, They chose Greg Norman of all people to run the operation. That should tell you just how dedicated they are to dividing the world of golf. Greg Norman is an extremely divisive figure who's had a decades-long beef with the PGA Tour. And the fact that LIV Golf hired him to manage things can't be a coincidence. He's also fully on board with the sports washing angle, which is to say that he's repeating the Saudi government's stance on pretty much everything with zero remorse. At the LIV Golf launch event, Norman openly tried to brush the Jamal Khashoggi incident as well as the country's human rights violations in general under the rug. He made it seem like these were minor mishaps, and that the country's recent modernization efforts make up for any harm it might have done in the past. Does that sound like something PGA players should get involved in? All in all, it feels like the LIV Golf League is weakening the sport as a whole, and no paycheck is heavy enough to change that. Okay, maybe some pros would need more practical arguments to convince them. Most people agree that leaving the PGA isn't in their best interests, but these are professionals we're talking about. They need some hard facts. So let's discuss one incontrovertible fact about the sport. The PGA Tour is an institution that can't be beaten, and golfers should stay in its good graces. Its history is steeped in tradition, and it helped to transform the gentleman's sport into the professional powerhouse that it is today. No matter how much money the Saudis throw around, their tournament is still just a shallow copy of the real thing, and it has none of the prestige of the PGA Tour. Even if LIV Golf somehow manages to improve its reputation down the line, it won't be able to come close to the level of the PGA Tour. Many of the tournaments organized by the PGA have been happening since the mid-20th century. They're not just cash grabs, they're bona fide parts of the community, and leaving them behind for a glitzy jaunt in the desert for a small fortune is a betrayal of golf's roots. There's a good chance that many of the players heading to Saudi Arabia will regret their decision in the long run. We might even see a lot of them wanting to return to the PGA Tour at some point down the line, but it won't be that easy. The PGA Tour won't forgive, and it certainly won't forget. Anyone that wants to come back will face a lot of challenges, with many top PGA players saying that defectors should be penalized. What shape these penalties will take is anyone's guess, but players like Scottie Scheffler want there to be some repercussions. With a potential merger between PGA and LIV on the horizon, some defectors might be looking for a way back, but the damage will already have been done. Some players went so far as to sue the PGA Tour, which Scheffler says was in extremely poor taste. They've already been suspended from their former employer, and things are going to get even uglier from here on out. Now, Rory McIlroy and a bunch of other pros want a more straightforward return route for players that realize the error of their ways. But the fact is that joining LIV Golf at this time would be career suicide. Why take the risk when there's a merger on the cards? So from the difficulties they'll face if they want to come back, to the century-long tradition they'd be leaving behind, here's why pro golfers should never leave the PGA.